Support for Amplified Voices comes from the Restorative Action Foundation. Learn more at restorativectionalliance.org.
Everyone has a voice, a story to tell. Some are marginalized and muted. What if there were a way to amplify those stories, to have conversations with real people in real communities, a way to help them step into the power of their lived experience? Welcome to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. Together, we can create positive change for everyone.
All right, hello. Welcome to an episode of Amplified Voices with me, your host, Jason, and my co-host, Amber. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning, Jason.
And today we have Iron from Hartford. Good morning, Iron.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So, as you know, the Amplified Voices podcast talks to people who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. We are very thankful that you agreed to come on. I know you personally through our interactions over the past year, and I would like you to start by telling a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you got involved with the criminal justice system.
Sure. So first, thank you for having me again. My name is Iran Nazario. I was born to a drug-addicted mom due to domestic violence and abuse that she sustained at the hands of my father. She was originally in New York with my father. After the abuse, she suffered some pretty serious injuries and was transported to Hartford. She was pregnant with me at the time, and her injuries forced her to have a cesarean section and emergency childbirth. And due to that experience, she had fractured ribs, a fractured eye socket, and a broken jaw due to the beating that she took from my father. And upon being released from my father, she ended up succumbing to the opioids and the drugs that they give her at the hospital, not only for the C-section, the cesarean section, but also for the other injuries she sustained. I would say maybe within a year's time, she was a full-blown addict, and that kind of spiraled her life out of control even more than it was due to the abuse.
Now, were you her first child?
I was her second child, and she tried to do what she could, and we ended up moving into the north end of Hartford. Sands is the name of the complex we lived in. And we were one of the only Latino families in Sands. It was mostly an African-American community at the time. And my mom, again, fought through this battle with addiction and eventually realized that we were more valuable due to the checks that she was receiving from the state than we were as children. And by that, I mean is that she started using us as income and to get her high and do all the things that she needed to do. So by the age of 6, my mom had, again, full-blown addiction. She started prostituting and selling herself in the north end of Hartford. So I would see as a young man, Johns coming in and out of the house to have sex with my mom. We shared a 1-bedroom apartment, and we pretty much were witnesses to a number of those acts that my mom would perform. So as a young person, being so young, my brother and I, we were really believing that this was a normalized state of existing. Because again, we were children, and that was our lesson. That was our school. So my mom ends up becoming pregnant from 2 individuals she was working with and what she was doing. And so I ended up having 2 additional siblings that were born from that lifestyle. So we eventually were reported to the Department of Children and Families, and we were removed from my mother's care and placed in foster care. So my brother.
So how old were you at that point?
I believe I was 6 or 7 years old. I had a number of injuries that I had sustained from my mom. She began to abuse me physically. And part of the reason why is because I looked like my dad, and she would get hot and punish me for it. So I grew up believing that pain was love. And that's what just bear with me for a second, because I remember now knowing more that there were certain things I would do to people and certain instances where I got into violent encounters that had a direct connection to my mother being abused, my mom abusing me, et cetera, et cetera. So we were removed, and my oldest brother and I were sent to a foster care home in New Jersey. My youngest brother was sent to Puerto Rico with my grandmother, and my youngest sister was sent to a family who adopted her and took her away. So what that did is cause that separation of my family that I knew, even though it was brutal and it was punishing, it's what I knew. So this was a strange world for me.
You were with one of your siblings?
Yeah, my oldest brother in New Jersey. So we eventually were claimed by my dad through the courts, and he was granted custody of us, and we moved into his house in Brooklyn, New York. And while we were there, we realized pretty quickly that the abuse mentality that my dad hadn't stopped. So he began to abuse us as well. And a few years later, we were removed from his care for child abuse and placed back into the foster care system, and then given back to my mom, who was still battling addiction. And we moved on to a street called Willard Street in Hartford, which is on the west end of Hartford. And while we were there, I was a little older, so I was able to see things a little bit differently. And my mom was now selling drugs with a younger boyfriend that she had, who was also an addict. And, our life was just in turmoil. We went to school every day. Somehow we just happened to manage. I don't know how people weren't catching it, but it is what happened. And eventually around the age of 11 or 12, my mom was arrested for selling drugs in the apartment. And I remember that being my first experience with the criminal justice system. And by the criminal justice system, I mean police, law enforcement. In that capacity, I have been involved with DCF and the DCF worker, but I don't remember police being involved in that. This is when I first have a recollection. And they kicked the door down. Officer ran into my room, guns drawn, and grabbed me by my hair. I had long curly hair at the time, and brought me to the hallway and put me on my knees and threatened to throw me down the stairs if I didn't tell them where my mom had the drugs. So,
and this is at 11 years old?
Yeah, I was 11 years old, 11 or 12 years old. And when that all happened, I remember.
Yeah, that's totally normal. Yeah.
Yeah, totally normal. I'll never forget the guy's name, what they called him. His nickname was Russian. And I remember the officers saying, "Hey, Russian. We got it over here," whatever. And that's just one of those things that just gets etched into your brain that you'll never forget. So that was my first interaction. So my mom is arrested and they're calling for my neighbor.
And they're treating you like a co-conspirator.
Absolutely. So my brother was at my neighbor's house at the time, so he didn't get to witness it. But my neighbor stepped in and said that she was family. So they left me with her, waiting for the Department of Children to come back. So by the time they got there, I ran away. So my brother stayed with the family. They ended up moving with him to Ohio, and I remained here by myself. So now I'm homeless, about 12 or 13 years old, and I'm sleeping in my friend Jose's father's van, who he's sneaking me into his father's van. So I'm sleeping there at night. And then a gentleman by the name of Steve Warner, who managed the property in the building where we lived, he would also open the basement door for me and let me sleep in the basement of the complex. So that's how I survived for a few months.
So you going to school as you're...
I'm out of school now. And I remember I went back. I'll go into the story and I'll tell you how I got back. So I'm homeless for some time. And then I meet this woman who was a little bit older than me. She had 2 kids. But by the time I met her, I was growing facial hair and I appeared to be a lot older than I was. And when you're homeless and you are walking the streets with homeless individuals and people, you grow up real fast. And I was growing up super fast. So I didn't have that child kind of experience. I just had an adult experience. I grew up pretty fast and I believed in that and thought like an adult, even though I was not ready to be one. So I got into this relationship with her, and that's when I was able to start going back to school. So I went back to school, and then I dropped out when I was 15 or so because I stabbed her a number of times. One of the things that I saw in her, I didn't see a partner, I saw a mom. And because I was so young, my mom had done so much to me and to hurt me that I felt that when this woman tried to break up with me, I took it as a very hurtful situation. And being as young as I was, I didn't know how to respond. And I have seen every action of my life being dictated by violence. So I thought that if I was violent towards her, that I could control her. And so I did. And I went above and beyond what any person's supposed to go as far as trying to injure someone. And I stabbed her about 3 times and I was arrested. And I was arrested for that. I got a 3.5-year sentence for the assault. So I ended up going to Morgan Street, which was...
So how old were you at that point?
I'm 15, going on 16.
Were you treated as a 15-year-old, or do you feel that you were treated as somebody who's an adult, who's been in the system a long time? And also, I'd like you to, comment, do you think your race was brought in terms of how you were treated?
You know what? It's hard to tell back then as far as the race part, but I know that every officer that responded was male white mostly. And I believe that in my interactions when my mom's door was kicked down and I was pulled by my hair, I think that had something to do with race, me being Latino and all of that. I'm not sure so much with the assault, but the system, definitely, I was treated, I believe, by race because, I was placed in Morgan Street, which was an adult facility primarily, and I was a kid. And they put me in the bullpen in Morgan Street, which was a dilapidated, broken down pretty much facility. And it was my first time being around adult males in that capacity. And I don't know, for those people that haven't been incarcerated, they strip you down, put you in a shower, and they spray you to make sure that you don't have any lice or whatever the case might be. And as a young man, that was like my first time ever having to be completely exposed and naked in front of grown men who were corrections officers doing that. And they ask you to spread your butt cheeks, and they, all this stuff that they ask you to do as a child. That was one of those things like, wow, like really I have to do this? But I did. And eventually once I got sentenced, I got sent over to Manson Youth Institute in Cheshire. And that was kind of like the start of my journey with the criminal justice system from the inside. But before that, I'd like to mention that I only saw my public defender once or twice during my whole time. And I only saw a court investigator, I believe, one time. And I never saw a counselor or youth advocate or anybody else that could say this young person has been abused since he was a child, has been in DCF custody or in foster care, has been abused by his father, has been involved with a mom who's a drug addict. Let's consider those things before we say this person is an evil young man. And that's where I think the system treated me very unfairly. And listen, I look back and I'm very apologetic and sad about what I did to her. She and I are friends now. She forgave me. We have talked. But I was a child and I had real ugly way of coping with my anger and things that I was feeling. I hadn't had any healing. So I ended up going to prison, and I'm here now, and I'm on the compound over there in Manson. And now I'm exposed to a whole new level of individual, a whole new level of systemic.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, but don't get the timeline. The stabbing happened when you were 15.
Yeah.
And when did you actually go to this youth facility?
I was about 16.
So now you're 16 years old. You're walking in, they're treating you just like you're this person who's evil, and you're in a facility with folks who are, some of them have backgrounds probably similar to yours and some probably don't, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I want to unpack a little bit, because I really am hearing what you're saying around this idea of trauma and the different touch points that could have possibly happened for you to intervene as a child with so much trauma. Whether it was DCF, whether it was a teacher, whether it was someone who could have intervened in your life to show you another way, because all you knew, it sounds like, was violence. And violence was a normal thing in your life and a mechanism for you to interact with people. Am I hearing that right?
It was, and you are hearing it right. I remember a teacher by the name of Miss Piskor, Piskor. She was the only teacher that ever came to my complex looking for me as to why I wasn't in school. And I remember my mom telling her, get away, is none of your business, or whatever the case might be. And I remember vividly when I was going to Quirk Middle School, fighting in the basement. Fighting was my mechanism. So if someone invited me to fight, or someone addressed me in a certain way, I was easily irritated and would respond what I felt was accordingly. Obviously, you know better now, so you know that's not the proper way. But you're right. I think that's one of those touch points that they missed in order to heal me from the aggression kind of addiction that I had to violence. So now I'm in Cheshire, and it was interesting because before I went to Cheshire, I hung out with everyone in Hartford, and it's a lot of violence between Hartford and Springfield, Hartford and New Haven, like town violence, right? Town on town. People didn't get along with each other and all that. So when I went there, it was now like a whole city versus another city, like Waterbury. The Waterbury kids would fight the Hartford kids and so on and so forth. And then if New York was there, all three factions of Waterbury, Hartford, New York would get together and fight New York. It was just like this chaos of loyalties and partnerships and conflict that were a part of growing up being incarcerated. And then one of the things that was clear for me that I learned was that system was made for power and control. And the more powerful you were, the stronger you were, the more push-ups you did, the bigger you were, the more power you had. They focus very little on the psychology of a person or the academic success of a person. It really was be as strong as you can because you have to fight through all of this. So I didn't really heal from that. If anything, I got bigger. I went in weighing about 130 pounds, came out weighing about 230. I mean, I was huge. I got huge in 3.5 years. And it was a lot of dips, a lot of push-ups, a lot of carbs. You know how they feed you in prison. And it was like pretty much went through puberty in that span. And I came out and I'm 19, almost 20, I think at the time I came home, and now I'm back out. And now I'm this, what I call a tank of aggression that's easily irritated, but I have more power, more weight behind that. So now I'm dangerous, but I'm also an asset to the gang life and the gang members that existed, because they're like, he's coming out. We need him to do this, this, and this. And,
Right.
based on my need and what I was looking for, I was looking for a family. I was looking for that kind of bond. I was an easy pickings. So,
Right. So if you go back to Amber's point earlier about trauma leading up to even going into this incarcerated situation, while you were there were missed opportunities for programs that could have given you an education, that could have helped you in terms of emotionally, but instead you were left to do all these things you described, become bigger, tougher. Basically, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They labeled you as this thing, right, that you evolved into, gaining 100 pounds, gaining muscle. And so now you walk out and you're telling us that the gangs just said, this guy's got to be one of us. We need him. We need him on our team.
Yeah, in Cheshire, they would send you to the school unit, but it wasn't mandatory. If you wanted to pursue it, you pursue it. Again, I don't remember ever seeing a counselor. I could be wrong. Maybe I saw it once or twice. I remember a visitor I got, a priest that came to see me from Hartford. He made it his business to visit kids that he knew from Hartford. I think I got that one visit all the time I was incarcerated there. So yeah, you come out and you're lost. People don't realize that I've never been incarcerated. Don't realize that when you come home, everything has changed so drastically that none of the connections that you had, family members that you had, are the same. People had dispersed or moved or whatever. So you come out to nothing. So I came
Right.
out.
You didn't have the most stable
Yeah.
background to come back to in the first place. So it wasn't like somebody's there with a plate of cookies saying, come on home, we're going to take care of you. It was,
Yeah.
where do you go?
Right. So I got sent to a halfway house when I was released, but the halfway house couldn't reach anyone. So when I was released from the halfway house, I had pretty much here, figure it out. So I ended up back on the streets, and getting back out and not having a real path started my in and out with prison. Because one thing that's true with the over policing of communities, the way they are and things of that nature, the more you're unstable, the more free time you have to hang out on block, the more interactions you're going to have with police and the more arrests are going to happen because you're out there. And it could be any minimal crime that they want to use to just get you off the block. Loitering, breach of peace. I mean, breach of peace and loitering were probably one of the easiest ways for any officer to do anything they wanted to you. Like literally, you could be walking down the block, they'll pull you over just to see who you are, harass you and say, oh, we're going to take you for breach of peace. And now, again, you spiral out of control and you start developing an anger and resentment towards officers in the system. So you're back in the system and they're checking you again and they're going into your private areas.
Where are you living at this point? Are you in Hartford? Are you homeless? You said halfway house. So, I mean, are you out of the halfway house?
I'm in the halfway house and I'm staying in different places. I'm staying with friends, girlfriends, girls I met just the other day, that, hey, let's hang out for a couple of weeks and whatever. And then I bounce to another place. I literally have lived in every corner of the city because literally I was transient like that. I was all over the place.
So do the police know you?
No, they don't know me yet. They're trying to figure out who I am, because one of the things that I've always been, and anyone that you ever meet will tell you, this has always been my demeanor unless you flip that switch. Once that switch was flipped, I'd go into a whole nother person. So officers wouldn't see me regularly because I wasn't walking around being loud and boisterous and being obnoxious or punching somebody for no reason. For me, it
You
was
were a
about,
spring.
yeah, and I would just kind of navigate through the community. And I went back to prison a number of times, but when I went back, one of the last times before my federal indictment, and I'll talk a little bit about that, I went back for an assault that I had on a girl I met's brother who didn't want me with her, and we got into a fight and I assaulted him and all that. So I was arrested and I went back to prison and I came out and the gangs were here. Los Solitos, the Latin Kings, the 20 Loves, all these gangs started to form and get bigger and bigger and bigger in the city. So when I came out of doing a 90-day sentence for assault third here in Hartford at the Meadows, I came home again to nothing. And now everyone's in a gang. There are yellow and black bees, red and blue bees, green and white bees, blue and white bees everywhere. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is this? So people were trying to actively recruit me for all the gangs because I knew people in all the gangs. So, and I finally ended up joining Los Solitos, the solid ones, because my brother was in the solid ones. I went where my brother was. But I had cousins on the other sides, and it was just a weird feeling because you had to go from loving them to wanting to kill them and vice versa, which is, it happens so quickly and you have to develop that kind of heart to do that. But thankfully, I never had to kill any of my cousins or anything like that. But yeah, you get thrust back in there, and that's kind of where it started a number of other criminal justice involved incidents where I was being arrested simply for wearing the color of the gang. And this is where they started to notice who I was. Now,
So can I just go back again to something that really struck me that you said as you're talking here? You talk about, well, I was just transient. I was trying to just have somewhere to be. And then when you came out, it was this whole new world. So in my mind, I'm thinking, first of all, it seems like you were looking for acceptance. You were looking for a safe spot to lay your head, if you will. And then what I hear you saying is when you came out, it was this whole new world and you had to kind of choose. And it was more of a survival to choose what gang to be a part of because that was the new world that you were thrust into after incarceration. So when you talk about why would somebody get involved with a gang, it just doesn't sound like something that is a positive thing to do, but unpacking why that would happen to someone.
yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head because I think that when you're going through everything that I was going through, options are limited and your reasoning is limited. And you don't necessarily see the consequences of joining a gang as something different than you experienced by not being in the gang. Because by not being in the gang, I was still going to jail. I was still fighting on the streets. I was still being targeted by systems that weren't helping me. So joining the gang was just a way of finding a level of support that I didn't feel I had all my life. And to be associated with a team of people that I felt loved me and cared about me is simple. The simplest things that we want is to be loved and appreciated and accepted and cared for, right? So if we find that in that system and that's the only exposure that you have, you don't know the other options. You don't know about college. You don't know about being able to work for this. And you really don't know any of that. So you go where you feel you're most safe and most protected, if that makes sense. You learn later on that it's not the best thing for you. But at the moment, you're like, this is it. This is what I have. And you make that choice. So yeah, you're right. I think that there is a lot that goes into that, but I think your life experience will limit your choices. And many times it's not of your choosing, of your own kind of design. It was just placed there for you. And those are the opportunities that present themselves. And that's one of the things that many people don't realize about that kind of lifestyle. That many times you're caught up in that cycle and you barely see anything else. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just thought that was a really important point in terms of the story and helping the viewers understand. So tell us a little bit about what happens next.
Yeah, so now I'm out there and I'm in this gang, and I remember walking down the street on Park Street in Hartford, and the gang task force have been created to kind of smother or arrest or target the gangs or suppress the gangs, whatever term they want to use. So I remember walking down Park Street, had my beads on. It was mandatory for you to wear your colors everywhere you went.
So what year is this?
This is 91, 92.
Okay.
So I'm wearing my beads and walking, and a gang task force drives up and they stop and say, hey, come here, let me talk to you. I hadn't done anything wrong. So no, I was just walking down the street with my beads on. But when I do something wrong, I take responsibility. I was just walking down the street, minding my business, wearing my colors, heading somewhere, and they parked their car in front of me, say, hey, come here, let me talk to you. And back then you saw that as normal, whatever. I'm a gang member, they're a cop, so they have a right to stop me, right? So they did, and they used to take Polaroid cameras and they would take a picture of you so they could keep it in their car and know who you were. And then they'd write your name on the Polaroid picture. And the guy says, I don't know you. Who are you? And I said, I'm so-and-so. He said, oh, okay. You have a nickname? And I said, yeah, my nickname is Smurf. He goes, okay. I've never seen you before, so we're going to keep an eye on you. And then before he left, he said it really loud. He goes, thanks for that information, buddy. And he jumped in the car and left. And if you know the streets and you know that you hear a detective saying thanks for the information like that, that puts you at risk. Luckily, we have become familiar with the tactic. So people knew that that was just a way for them to try to get me messed up or whatever. So that's kind of like where my life started going. And then we went to war with 4 of the major gangs in the city over different disputes. And that's when the bodies started to drop all over the place. And they called in the state police and the FBI. And then that made us even more of a target. for harassment and humiliation and threats and beatings and all the things that come with a suppression tactic, right? So we started being chased all the time and hunted all the time. I remember a scenario where the officers would put us in police cars and take us to the cemetery and beat us up for information or try to get information. I remember other incidents where they would get you in the car and mace inside the car, lock all the windows and doors to try to, punish you before they took you to the holding blocks at Morgan Street and Meadows. So, I mean, that's kind of like where my life went. And eventually I got an opportunity, and I won't share that story. It's a long story, but I just wanted to say this. I got an opportunity by someone to get my first real glimpse of what outside of Hartford looked like. This is a gentleman who was a professor at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work, and he was doing a research project in 1994, I believe, for what they call disproportionate minority hiring in construction companies and others. And I remember the story vividly because, just bear with me, this is hilarious but beautiful at the same time. He pulled up in a yellow convertible Mercedes-Benz, okay? In my hood, middle of the day, top down, dressed in a suit. So I'm on the corner with four of my brothers, and we're just hanging out and whatever. We had a building that was dedicated to our gang, and it was called Central Office, which is interesting. It was called Central Office, and that's where all the major leaders would have meetings and stuff. So we have that building. And we were right outside the building, and he gets out and he starts walking towards us. So just picture it for a minute. Go there with me for a minute. Here you are, this gang, right? We have 1,800 members strong. We are at war with other gangs. And here comes this guy walking in a suit, getting out of a convertible Mercedes. And he's walking towards us. We're thinking three things. One, this got to be an FBI agent. We have to run. Two, this guy must have a lot of money and wants drugs. Three, he has a convertible Mercedes-Benz in a suit. He has money. We can rob him, right? Those are the three things. So he gets close to us and he pulls out a form and he says, "Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Borrero, and I'm doing a study on disproportionate minority hiring, and I want to talk to you guys." So, mind you, I'm illiterate. I dropped out of school. I really don't know what disproportionate minority hiring is. So I have no idea what it means. So the brothers are like, "Yo, what the hell he say?" And we're like, "I don't know what he said, but yo, you better get that." And so now we get into our mode like, this guy's not a risk because he's not an FBI agent. He's not here to buy drugs. He says something real funny and crazy that we all understand. So let's let him have it. So we start, whatever. And I think I got to give it to him. He had a heart of steel. He was not afraid. He said, "Okay, brothers, I mean no disrespect, guys." He started walking back to his car. We started coming after him. Like a couple of us had guns and we're like, "He's like," we're getting irritated. And he says, I love him for this. He says, "Here's my card." And he drops it and he takes off. And before he takes off, he goes, "I'll pay you guys up $15 an hour. This is real, man." And that hit me like, wow, like $15 an hour was like a lot of money, when you don't have anything. I'm like, wow, $15 an hour. So I acted tough, and I was tough, but I picked up his business card and I put it in my pocket. And I walked back to the brothers. I'm like, "Yeah, I told him, acting." But in my head, I'm like, wow, $15 an hour. So I didn't call him for a while because I went back to jail for another assault and then back again because of another assault. I was kind of spiraling out of control. So I had hit rock bottom. I got out for another 90-day sentence for just a fight that I had with someone.
Mid-20s?
Yeah, I'm mid-20s now.
Okay.
So I get out and I have no direction, man. Like literally nowhere to go. I think I'm feeling beat down at this point. I hadn't got any resources. They didn't send me to any programs. Still, the system wasn't doing anything to help me that I felt I could get. So I'm back out on the street and I'm hopeless, man. I'm just like completely sunken in. I've lost pretty much all my contacts. People got tired of me being arrested and back and forth and stuff. So I'm kind of going back to being homeless. A guy named Texador gave me an opportunity to stay with him for a few months. You can only stay here for a few months, but then you got to go, man. I got other stuff I got to do. So luckily for me, I reached into the pocket of these old pants, and guess whose card I found? Michael Borrero.
Wow.
Michael, fate was ready for me, I guess. So I called him from a payphone, if you remember payphones. I got a few quarters and I called him. And when I did, he shockingly surprised me when I said to him, "Hey, I want to talk to Michael." And he answers the phone. He says, "Who is this?" And I used my nickname Smurf. And I said, this is Smurf, man. I want to talk to you. He goes, Smurf. Oh, I remember you. He remembered me because when the brothers said Smurf, he heard it and somehow he remembered it. He goes, I remember you from last year or something like that. You were on Park Street and I wanted to offer you a job. And I said, yeah, that's me. What's up? And he goes, oh man, I missed you. And I heard that and I hung up the phone because no one had ever told me that in my entire life. I missed you. So to me, in my heart, I thought that he was trying to come on to me in romantic. So I feel disrespected. I just want you to know that that's how
Yeah.
traumatized and hurt I was and vulnerable I was.
So even when someone tries to do something nice for you, you're looking at it through the lens of what you grew up with, which is a lot of skepticism, right?
Right.
He's got to be trying to hurt me in some way.
Exactly. So I hang up and I don't call him for a few months. I'm struggling. I'm all over the place. I'm not seeing much light. And so I call him back and he answers the phone again. And I say, can I speak to Michael? Because this is Michael. I said, this is Smurf. Before you say anything, what do you mean by you miss me? I wanted to make sure it was clear. He goes, no, man, I meant to say that I missed the opportunity to connect with you because I think that you could really help me in the project that I'm doing. And I said, all right, cool. He said, you still paying $15 an hour? He said, yeah, I'm still doing that. That's still the amount. I said, all right, I want the job because I need the money. He goes, well, okay, if you want the money, you have to come to West Hartford School of Social Work. And I said, oh, hell no. I'm not going to West Hartford. If I go to West Hartford, I'm going to jail. I'm Puerto Rican. Puerto Ricans don't go to West Hartford, dude. But that's what we thought. We thought that we didn't belong there. I'm in Hartford, which is, I'm not living, but I'm kind of roaming around Asylum Avenue, which is literally a 5-minute, 10-minute drive into West Hartford. So I'm not far away, but it's a world apart from me. So he says, if you want the job, that's what you got to do, bro. I was like, oh, man, I got to go to West Hartford, man. I'm going to go to jail. That's exactly what I thought. So I get on a city bus and I'm shaking and I'm as terrified as I've ever been because I'm going into a place that I don't belong. And I'm on the bus and I'm not being disrespectful.
We're going to have listeners all over the country and, people might not be familiar. So Hartford is a city. West Hartford is a very affluent suburb that, as Iran is explaining, even though it's very close, it could be in another planet.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm on the bus and the further we go into West Hartford, out of Hartford, the more white people get on the bus and the less people of color are on the bus. And that's just my reality. That's what I saw. And this was my first time ever being around white people without being incarcerated or on trial or on DCF custody. So I didn't have very many good positive experiences with white people. That's just my reality. And so I get to the campus and it literally is its own village because to me, again, I'm from a different place and I see all these kids hustling and bustling with backpacks and book bags and I'm where are they going? What's going on? Why are they in such a hurry? And I see them playing sports I've never seen in my life. That you kick that little ball. What's it called? It's a little ball. Yeah, we didn't play that in my neighborhood and we're playing all these things and I'm like, what? What is this? This is a whole new planet for me. So I go up to the third floor and people are looking at me weird. I have my gang colors on, by the way, just so you know. So I'm at the University of School of Social Work and I got all my gang paraphernalia on and all that. And I'm walking through the hallways asking people where's Mike Ferrero. So I'm sure they were like, who are you? What are you here to do? And so I finally get to Mike and he's just a very unique individual. He comes up to me. He goes, hey, Smurf. He goes to hug me, and I'm like, bro, back up, man. Because again, I didn't grow up around that affection with people, especially adult men coming at me that my dad wasn't treating me like that. The brothers that I had, it was a different thing. And I was like, he was like, cool, no disrespect, man, what's up? So we sat down. I didn't know how to fill out an application. I didn't have any of that ability. So he helped me fill out an application. I never filed taxes and all that stuff that you're supposed to do when you get a job. And I was on a contract. It was more like a temporary thing until I proved myself. But it was the first time I had learned about accountability because he was teaching me that. But then he said, one of the things that you have to do in order to get this job, you have to speak in front of one of my social work classes. So this is a undergrad class for up and coming social work. So he asked me to tell my story in front of this class. So talk about being scared, man.
Wow, that's daunting.
So you kidding me? So I go in front of the class and he goes, hey, but the way he said it, and he'll tell you the story because he knows it's true. he said, "Hey guys, I have a real special treat for you today. All of you that are getting into social work, you have to know what the lives of people that are struggling are like. So I have a real authentic gang member for you." And I know the word authentic now. So I'm like, now I understand it. But back then, I didn't know what authentic was. So I spoke for about 30 seconds. I promise you it was about 30 seconds. I said, "Hi, my name is Smurf, and I'm in a gang. I'm in Los Solidos, and we're in Hartford." And that's all I really knew what to say because I wasn't ready to dig deep like
Right.
I'm doing right now. I didn't know what to
Right.
do. So they got up and clapped for me, which is weird because I didn't say much. But, and it was the first time that I remember ever feeling okay about saying something, right? And I think that that was the transition part of my evolution because I remember.
I mean, at that point, you're starting to work with the school, but you're still an active gang member.
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% real and 100% involved. We're still at war.
The way you're telling the story, it sounds to me that this is the start of something. This was a seed that was planted in you.
Yeah.
It started your movement away from the gangs that's going to happen at some point, right?
Yeah.
You also mentioned that you had a federal charge, and I know that from talking with you in the past. Has that already happened, or is that yet to happen?
That's that yet to happen. So now I'm working with Mike, but it's funny because I knew that had an impact on me because I was told to stop talking about it. Because I went back to the neighborhood and we didn't disappear for that long unless you were in jail, right? So, so I went back to the community and they were like, "Smurf, where you been? We've been looking for you all day, bro. Like you ain't been out here. What's going on?" And I told them I went to that University of Connecticut School of Social Work and they said, "You lying, bro. You stupid. You lying. You telling lies." I said, "I'm serious, bro. Here's the paperwork." And they were like, "Yo, you lying. You didn't go over there. We don't go over there." And I was like, "Bro, I was there, man. And this is what happened." So about 3 months in, people were like tired of me talking about the story. They were like, "Yo, shut up, man. We heard you like 100 times already." But I finally had something to change the narrative in my discussions with people because all we talked about was blood. What's up, man? Homie, my dude. We got this going on. We got that beef. It was always, we were talking about things in our bubble. We never had anything new to introduce to it.
In the big scheme of things, it wasn't that huge a thing, but for you, it was tremendous.
Yeah, because you know how your brain, and we talked about it earlier, when you're addicted to anything, I don't care what it is, you develop a pathway in your brain that is pretty healthy, right? For that. So what this did is it opened up a new path in my brain that was yet to be formed, but it had something, right? So it was a different way of thinking and a different way of seeing the world. And now I was no longer afraid to go to West Hartford. Just think about that. I was no longer afraid to get on that bus and no longer afraid that seeing a white person meant I was going to be taken to jail or taken away from my family or whatever it was, right? So that's a huge thing
That's
for me
huge.
because it gives me confidence that I belong there. And that's what I was talking to the brothers about. I'm going about, but I'm still in the gang. So we're still at war. I'm still being shot at. I'm still involved in fights. There's so many stories that I have. Again, there's too many to tell, but I'm still involved in all of that. So the FBI is called in because people are dying left and right. I think we had 60 plus murders that year in Hartford. So, the shootings and everything that was happening was so overwhelming to the Hartford police and state police that they called in the FBI to start wiretapping us. And the FBI would come to the university to interview me, trying to ask me questions. And I went and Mike was like, "What's going on? Why are the FBI coming here?" And obviously it was scaring the professors and the students because you had these FBI agents coming with their jackets and FBI on it to the school to talk to some guy. And so as time went by, they signed the RICO Act on the gang for all the crimes that we had committed, not only in the state, but outside of the state. And that led to a federal indictment. In the federal indictment, I was listed as one of the defendants because of my involvement and my leadership role. I had a leadership role in the gang as well. And because I had a leadership role, they wiped out pretty much all the leadership: president, secretary, treasurer, warlords, chief executive, chief warlords, all the different heads of the gangs were starting to be indicted. So I was one of them. So I was about 27 or so, 28. I've been working at the Institute for a while and I was indicted for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder after the fact, and a number of other charges that I faced for things I did and things I didn't. Because when they indict you, they lump up all the charges. So they put you in the people that sold drugs, and I never sold drugs, didn't want to. My mom was a drug addict, so that wasn't my course of income. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to sell drugs to people who I knew were going through what my mom went through. It wasn't my thing. My mom was still a drug addict, so I didn't feel. But if you talked about violence and fighting, and yeah, that was my thing. So essentially, I got indicted for a number of crimes, and I went to trial 3 times, hung jury twice, and eventually I agreed to plead guilty to misprision of a felony, which is lying to the FBI in the commission of a felony. And I was sent to Fort Dix, New Jersey, to serve 18-month sentence for misprision of a felony in New Jersey. And I was put into the segregation unit at the Meadows because of my high position in the gang, and I was kept there for quite some time in isolation because they were afraid that I would hand down orders in the jail and whatever.
So isolation means you were completely alone. So I've heard isolation sometimes is other people are with you.
Me alone.
How many hours of the day?
Oh, you only had 2 hours a day to get out. Phone call, shower, counselor, or lawyer, if you had time to see your lawyer. So I was held there for some time until I was bailed out. Then I was held on home confinement. And then eventually I pleaded guilty and I went to Fort Dix. I was put in segregation at Fort Dix because, again, they had communicated that I had a high role in the gang. And eventually I was let into general population after 2 weeks, I think it was. So now I'm in federal prison in New Jersey. But by that time, I had been exposed to Mike Guerrero, a different way of thinking. So I actually started pursuing what I could in the federal prison. So if they had a school program or anything that I could learn, I was pursuing it.
Were you part of a gang while you were in prison?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same gang. Okay. So I was in 4 different gangs growing up, but this was the one I was in like long term. This was like what I call the all out big gang, right? It was a huge gang. So I was in there for the 18 months, came home, went to a halfway house again, and then was rehired by UConn to continue my work there because I started a letter writing program in prison for teens that communicated to teens the impact that prison has on us rather than trying to glorify prison. I was talking about the loneliness and the fear and the uncertainty of prison, the loud noise in prison, the long nights in prison, all the things that the brutality of prison that it can be.
This is in the mid 90s.
Yeah, late 90s now. This
late
is
90s.
Yeah, 98, 99.
Okay.
And then I was released right before 2000 from there into the halfway house, and I left the halfway house in 2000. And, kind of returned back to doing the work that I did. And then my involvement with the criminal justice system didn't end because now I had the scope on my back where I had come home and local law enforcement was still battling the gangs. And I was doing something different. I had wanted to do something different, but they weren't ready to let me move on. They still considered me a threat. So I would get pulled over. I got pulled over one time by the gang task force because they said that the air in my tires wasn't adequate for my car. And we were going in opposite directions. Okay. Opposite directions at 35 miles an hour. Just saying. How can you see that my tires are not properly inflated? It was made up to pull me over. They gave me a warning, but they just wanted to look in my car and see if they saw any weapons, just that whole thing. So that went on for about another 7 to 8 years where, where I was working and doing my best to try and move into a different direction, stand for something different. But today I understand it. Don't get me wrong. I don't sit here pretending that some of it wasn't justified because of the things that I had done. It was hard to trust you. But I also know that part of where I was happened because the system failed me at so many different levels growing up.
How did you break away from the gang? I mean, it sounds like, was it a slow process, an incident?
No, it was a slow process. So what happened after I started working for Compass when I was at the Peace Builders program, I started helping brothers and sisters who had kids that were now in the same situation that we were. They had their kids were in gangs. Their kids were dropping out of school. Their kids were fighting. And I started mediating conflicts, and I became an expert mediator and conflict resolution expert and all that, training and all that. And I started helping alleviate and reduce conflicts in the city and helping brothers' kids out that I was giving what they call walking papers, OG status, which means that you are forever regarded as someone who's respected, but you no longer have to associate or affiliate yourself with their actions or what they do. So I was given approval to kind of remove myself and do what I do for this. So that was one of the highlights of my life because it allows me to remain effective in working with people in gangs, but it also allows me the freedom to be who I need to be right now. So that's how it kind of happened. And now I'm doing what I do. And it took me a long time to get the trust of law enforcement and the criminal justice system. For me, this is a passion of mine to help people because I know how important it would have been for me to have those touch points, as was mentioned earlier. that could have helped me. So if I can do that now, that's what I'm
So
going to do.
when did you form the Peace Center?
Peace Center has been 3 years now. It's 2016 when I started the concept and founded it in 2017. And so we've been out for about 3 years.
If you would, could you just kind of go over exactly what you do at the Peace Center?
Sure. So on the presidency, we have what I call 4 pillars of service. One is a youth development academy in the summer, where we train up to 15 young people how to have a more peaceful existence, a peaceful involvement in your community. The second is what we call peace conversations. We're hired to go out into different communities and facilitate conversations between groups who are in conflict. We have professional development and training for school systems, social services organizations that are working with young people in risk. And then we have finally research that we do around what can we do to improve communities around the state of Connecticut to become more peaceful. So those are like our 4 pillars of service. But within that umbrella, we have a number of other projects that we do. And we're going to be launching what we call Windows to Peace, which is a social services kind of focused program and project using the arts to help people communicate and have discussions. That'll be in August, social distance style, obviously. But then we also do, again, working with other systems, and we support current violence prevention efforts as well as the Peace Center. So we're hired and contracted by the city of Hartford and other cities to help during times of crises. I'm actually going to be working with the town of Wethersfield, Connecticut on helping them improve race relationships between officers, the community, and young people. So those are some of the efforts that we also are involved in.
If anybody wants to support your efforts, what can they do?
So if they want to support, you can visit our website, peacecenterofct.org. It's a beautiful red donate button on there if you want to donate to help us continue our work. Or if you really just want to give us advice or just kind of read through what we offer and you have a community that needs that and you feel like we're the right candidate for that, give us a call. Also, if folks have a specific skill that they want to offer as far as board membership and they're interested in supporting that way, they can do that. Or if you're an intern or a school community and you have interns that really want to get a great experience in working in community, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. So yeah, we encourage people to look that up and support you.
It really sounds like you're doing a lot of work that would have benefited you
Absolutely.
and your family. It's astounding and amazing to have really walked through the fire that you've walked through. And this idea of saint and sinner, good and bad, really doesn't speak to the true humanity of people. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to amplify with this particular podcast, especially in that period where you were trying to move forward with your life. You still had involvement with gangs or whatnot. And there was this system that just was standing in the way of you getting there.
Yeah. If you understand the psychology behind that system, you understand why they behave that way. And you're training a system to punish you. It's hard for them to forgive you and see a different side of you and to see your aspirations and your potential, because it's designed to correct you by punishment, not by drawing the best out of you, but by smothering you and teaching you that they're in control. So when you start to change, and just like I was trained to be violent, they're trained to oppress in a way by smothering your potential and by always seeing you as a suspect. Bear with me for a second. I had a conversation yesterday, about an hour and a half conversation with Officer Jimmy Barrett from the Hartford Police Department in our parking lot. He come by to ask me to help a young man that needs help. So we were talking, and I didn't know his story. I talked to him for a while. And after I was done, I realized that he's in a police officer's uniform. I'm in my Peace Center stuff. And he served 3 combat tours in the military. He was a corrections officer for 9 years, and now he's been with the police department for almost 19. But he developed the first unit in the Hartford Police Department that's specifically targeting and helping support the homeless. So he has a huge van that he just got dedicated where he carries underwear, socks, gloves, and all he does is goes around the street all day long, picking up homeless, saving homeless, making sure they're okay and all that stuff. But what I got out of our connection was that he had witnessed so many people die next to him in combat, friends, allies, neighbors. And when he came back from combat, his community had been changed and everything about him had been changed, the traumas that he experienced and all that stuff. And I saw it as not very different in a sense than my experience. And the facts are that he was trained to kill, but his spirit is retraining himself to love and give back. And that's what happened to me. I was trained to hurt, and my spirit is doing the same thing. So I think for me, I think there are a number of people walking through fire, but unfortunately they hit a wall. When they walk through the fire, a wall is put up to make them have to climb while they're burning. And we have to figure out a way to remove those barriers and reform that system to think about what they're doing to increase the likelihood that people are going to come back.
Well, what's remarkable is where you started from and where you are today, and the person that you are today, who's, respectable, who is doing so many positive things for the community. And I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud to call you a friend. It's so incredible, and you are so strong. And what it took for you was a person seeing something in you and then having that just take some time to percolate, right? Whereas if you had had more resources along the way, if you had had programs like the one you're building, life would have been so much different for you and for so many others. And so I wanted to pivot a little bit and ask you a couple of quick things. We may want to have you back on because your story is so compelling and there's so many things. But I wanted to talk for a minute. We've got pardons in the news again, and I know that you had applied for a federal pardon.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that process, what it was like for you, and are you still hopeful to get one of these days?
To answer the last question, yes, one of these days. The process was daunting. I did it on my own. I didn't have any legal support. So going through all of that and being able to secure all the documentation that they want you to secure and have recollection of every crime you committed, it is a pretty challenging process by yourself. It took me a while to get everything, all the documents they need, all the proof, because you have to get your probation records, your incarceration records. I had to write to the Federal Bureau of Prisons to get my records from federal prison. So that took a lot of time to get all that stuff together, but I managed to do it. And then I submitted the application. They reviewed it. They sent it back to me with additional questions, and I had to amend the application because they had some questions about timelines and things like that. They're really thorough about making sure that you fill out everything. And then they sent out an FBI agent to do follow-ups with every single person that knew me. And the only reason I knew that was because people were calling me and saying, hey, the FBI came to my job, or the FBI came to my school, or the FBI came to my house, or the FBI called me and it's about you. What's this about? Not just the references. I'm talking about people they studied or reviewed or learned about. Even my enemy that I had, they interviewed, which I was shocked because one of my former enemies called me, yo, dude, like, what's going on? Like, the FBI hit me up and they asked me, we get along now, because they knew that we had conflict in the past. So it was a very eye-opening process. And then I met with the FBI agent for about 2.5 hours. He did advise me that even if one sentence that I told him was wrong, that they toss the application back down to me and deny me my pardon. So they do leave you with a level of uncertainty. He was a nice guy, but he was following whatever training he had and whatever the law said. So finally he submitted it. He took back the review, the amended version of it, and I haven't heard back. So I don't know what the standing is. I think if I remember correctly, the percentages for federal pardon are less than 7%, something like that for people like me. So we'll see where it's at. But I mean, what it would do, I think it would allow me in my conversations with brothers and sisters that don't have hope that they could ever receive one, for me to be able to be in my position to say, yes, you can. This is what can happen. But it doesn't relinquish anything that I've done or doesn't steer me away from the fire that I have to help people. But I know that it would be another tool in my toolkit that I could use to inspire other people to go for it. So hoping to get it soon.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. The other question I have for you is, you have your older brother and then 2 other siblings you talked about. How are they doing?
My eldest brother was murdered 12 years ago.
Sorry.
My sister, she succumbed to drug addiction and prostitution for many, many years after she left her foster family. She's doing better now. She actually just completed 6 years of sobriety. Recently, she took Reiki classes, so she's now a Reiki master and does Reiki and stuff like that. My youngest brother, because of the drug addiction, my mom used a lot of drugs when she was pregnant. He has mental health issues due to that, and he's battled a little bit of the drug addiction. But recently I saw a photo. He's driving trucks now, so it seems like he's stabilizing some. But all 4 of us, unfortunately, went through a series of problems and addictions based on how the system, we all went to prison. which is incredible that, all four of us, not one of us was safe from prison, but it's not surprising. But I think everyone so far is okay with the exception of my brother who was murdered. And it weighs heavy on me because I know his potential. I knew his heart, and he was murdered for stopping a fight.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's the hard part. He broke up a fight, and one of the guys in the fight shot him in his back. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing because he's the one I suffered. He and I went through everything together, and it was like to lose him like that. But, I'll fight on for his spirit and keep doing what I'm doing.
That's awesome. And I know that everything that you do every day touches so many lives.
Yeah, I love the feeling I have every day when I wake up because it's another opportunity for me to heal what's wrong, to help somebody, or to, in some way, shape, or form, make the world better somehow. And I never know how, I just do. I'm going to do this, do that, do this, do that. You really never know your impact. Sometimes you hear people tell you, hey, you impacted me like this, and you saved my life here and there. But you don't do it for that. You just do it because it's what your heart tells you to do. And hopefully by the time I'm called to wherever I'm going, I'll have made as many changes as possible and as many lives. Because it's that one thing that I needed, that interruption and suffering that I want to be for someone else.
Just like a guy who dropped a card and remembered that you were called Smurf.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. But I'll never forget the term though, disproportionate minority hiring.
There you go.
All right, great. So before we close out, do you have any other things you really want to say, press, make sure that we get across, or?
No, I mean, I've said a lot, and I just wanted to thank you for launching this platform. I agree with you in your opening comments that this is about being able to give folks the space to share from a real open standpoint what it's like to be incarcerated, what the system is like, and how reform needs to be real reform, and how we are valuable assets and that we have ability, talents, and gifts that are sometimes smothered. And this is a platform that can hopefully help people understand that a little bit better. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Iran. I learned a lot today.
I really did too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, Amber.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
You've been listening to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. For more information, episodes, and podcast notes, visit amplifiedvoices.show.